What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 117 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Slipscreen Games' weekly gaming podcast all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy, you lovely boys.
Ahoy, my boys, and welcome back. We got a fun one today because, of course, over on our sister show, the Nintendo Noise Podcast, last week we had a conversation all about the official reveal of Nintendo Switch 2. And
oh my god, they've announced a second one.
Oh my god, finally! Only took them 3 years.
We're still waiting on the NX though, but we've had Switch and Switch 2 in that time, so that's
weird.
crazy.
Yeah. Very strange. Hopefully we'll get the NX2 one of these days too. So the reason we're talking about that on this show is there was like a bit of an interesting development that happened kind of right after this announcement, and we thought it would be worth pulling on to see if this is potentially a sign of things to come, because if you know anything about the Steam charts, the Steam Deck has, generally speaking, been right at the top of the charts, right? It's almost always in the top 5 sellers. It's often, a top 1, a top 2. It's gone as low as in the low 10s, but like it's rarely seen a huge drop like that, right? And there was a post that was making the rounds over on Blue Sky this week that was showing it at the lowest it's ever been on the top sellers list, which was 47, which is obviously pretty low, right? And this was called out by, and I'm probably going to murder this man's last name, but Pavel Jonic from SteamDB, he's the creator of SteamDB, he pointed out that this is the lowest that it's ever been since its release in 2022. And yeah, I mean, obviously that's a pretty big reaction to the announcement of an alternative, handheld device, right? Like it does seem a little bit interesting that would happen so dramatically that week.
So he does follow up on that initial tweet immediately, pretty much saying people are pointing out that the top sellers this week look weirdly broken. That there are sort of some games that should be in there, like Civilization 7, and other games that aren't showing up at all in the list. So there is a chance that this is a fluke, but that will be it is a strange coincidence that it will be the week that the Switch 2 is revealed. So there is, it could be that people who are thinking about buying Steam Deck were like, oh, I'll hold off and I'll save up for this because I know what I'm getting with this. There's, the Steam Deck was like I would like a more powerful Switch, whereas now that thing they wanted actually is coming. So yeah, could be that.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I thought it was interesting kind of either way is, like, to your point, it seems a little suspect that you would have this, it just happened to be a weird week, the same week as the Switch 2 announcement. So my thought is, like, perhaps even if that data is a little bit skewed, that there was some significant drop-off that week either way, and maybe it's not as significant as 47, but maybe it was somewhere hovering in the 20s or something like that, right? And that's maybe where you're getting that discrepancy.
The only other thing I could think is if it's not a glitch, like had they just ran out of stock and it hadn't replenished, and like people couldn't buy these things,
this is worldwide 47 as well, whereas we are, and I guess it's always sort of in the global top sellers, but for me, when I looked, it was number 1. I think you said it was number 2 for you, Pete,
when you
looked.
In my region behind Marvel Rivals, yeah.
So I wonder if there are regions where it didn't sell at all, and that's really brought the numbers down. That could
definitely be the case too. We have seen that happen where like they have a period where it's like, oh, you actually can't order one right now, and then they come back out. So could definitely be that as well. But it again, right, like maybe that's a factor, but that has happened before, and we've not seen it globally drop to 47. So it's like, again, it becomes the like, is there a glitch going on here? Is this the sign of something else? I think either way, we all were very interested by the question, right? Is like, does the Switch 2 represent a threat to the Steam Deck and to the handheld PC market, right? That like for a long time, right? Like we've been talking that like there is a very significant segment of the Steam Deck user base, of the handheld PC user base, right? That are folks that have a Nintendo Switch, that were early adopters of the Switch, that love handheld gaming and want something with more power under the hood. And obviously the Switch 2 represents that, right? And it represents all the other advantages that come along with something that's, simpler, more plug and play, probably quite a bit cheaper, right? Like even if it's on the upper echelon of estimates for price, still probably a couple $100 cheaper than a Steam Deck. So
all of those console benefits that people buy consoles for come in the Steam Deck. Come in the Switch 2 rather, as opposed to this Switch, the Steam Deck. For all that we love the Steam Deck, there is still that bit. Sorry, Steve, there is still that bit of, is it just this simple? Yeah, but, and then there's like some tinkering and some things don't work and blah blah blah.
I mean, but that obviously comes with all the negatives that you get from a console as well. Like you can install things like EmuDeck, you can play games from other places.
Yeah,
you don't get access to potentially the best indie games on day one because they are going to take a while to port from PC to console, and they usually come out on PC first. So while the Switch 2 probably at first glance seems like, oh yeah, great, it's maybe going to be a bit more powerful than the Steam Deck or on par with the Steam Deck, would be my guess. That there are reasons I think that people still want a Steam Deck and still want a handheld PC and potentially aren't interested in the Switch. But I do think a large portion of people were coming over and even checking out in the first place, new people to PC, was because, I had a Switch, but it didn't have Red Dead Redemption 2 on it, and I really want to play that, or it didn't have...
I wanted to play Elden Ring on a handheld, right? Something
exactly. Like that. And that's something you can obviously do with the Steam Deck, and it's rumored you'll be able to play all of those games on Switch 2, but we don't know. And we don't know the price point. We don't know when it's coming out. There's so many things that are just unknowns at the moment that I think that's why I struggle to believe that this is anything other than a glitch. Like if the Switch 2 had come out and you could pre-order it on the same week, then maybe people are canceling their pre-orders or not ordering a Steam Deck or whatever. But I feel like, it's up in the top of the charts all the time anyway, because the way the charts work is it's based on as far as I'm aware, like the amount sold in terms of money, rather than the number of copies sold. It's like, because the Steam Deck costs so much money, it's always pretty high up the charts, because
one's worth 8 of any copy of a game
one
sold.
is 8 copies of a game, and you've only got to sell like 10 of them, and you've sold 80 copies of the game, so it's always going to be pretty high up the charts.
I think that's why I'm leaning towards either, like you said, that it being a stock issue, or it's a glitch. But I do think you're right. It is an interesting point to make of when this does release with Switch 2. What does that mean for the wider handheld PC audience, and what does that mean for people like us who every week come down, we sit down, we talk about handheld PC, we talk about the Steam Deck in particular and what we've been playing. Is the Switch 2 going to take away from that for people? Are they going to coexist? Are there going to be people who are desperate for an emulator to release for Switch 2,
I think
so they can start playing it on their Steam Deck?
I think it's probably a little of both. Like I do think that the idea that like they can't coexist, I think is definitely, I just don't agree with that, right? Like I obviously, the metrics for their success are just so different, right? Like the Steam Deck exists as a niche product, a more, enthusiast product, right? And like it's not aiming for the same like level of like mass market penetration that the Switch or the Switch 2 are, right? Yeah. So I think to your point, and to some of the points that Steve was making, like there's always going to be the segment of the audience that are like tinkerers, or that are PC enthusiasts, or that are Steam enthusiasts or whatever, right? Who are like, like I don't think that even if the Nintendo Switch 2 is bigger and badder and more powerful and cheaper and all those things, there's still a myriad of advantages that come with the Steam Deck, right? Like stuff like emulation, stuff like, having access to your Steam library and having access to games that are not on Nintendo and will probably never come to the Switch, right? Those are all things that I think like, those differentiators don't go away. I think where I'm more interested is that like type of player that we've discussed in the past of like, somebody that like isn't really a big like PC enthusiast, and like the Steam Deck was very much their kind of like inroad to Steam and everything, right? And like that person who is more of a handheld console player than a PC enthusiast, right? And wanted the more power, this, that, all those other things that we talked about. Like, does a more powerful, less expensive alternative in the Switch 2 like move that needle for that segment, right? Like, you're muted.
There's got to be other factors in there, though, right? Like, it can't just be that it's more powerful. Those publishers have to spend the time to port the games to bring them over to Switch. You know, it's not like Nintendo did all the hard work for them in the same way that Valve did all the hard work for these publishers, where they've put Proton together and now all of a sudden your PC game runs on this Linux-based handheld. Those developers have got to spend time. They've got to spend the resource and figure out, is there a market for it? Is it worth us putting this investment in to bring them over? Whereas someone who has a Steam account probably already has those games, can log straight in and play them on their Steam Deck. So yes, I think a more powerful Switch is what people have been asking for and is what everyone's wanted for years at this point. But we also need better third-party support. Like, I feel like the Switch really hit it out the gate with third-party support. Like, we got Bethesda on a Nintendo platform for the first time. We got support from Rockstar with LA Noire, but then they didn't kind of follow through. Where was GTA 5? That never came over. We never really got like any of the other big games from Ubisoft, for example. Ubisoft and EA would do their own games for Nintendo software exclusively, but they wouldn't bring over the games that they were releasing on other platforms.
Yeah. Or they were massively hampered, like the FIFA ports.
Yeah,
like from
FIFA
last gen.
It was like a 2013 version that they just kept trying out over and over again and just changing the names in it. And you didn't get any of the improvements. And I think that if Nintendo can get better third-party support moving forward, which it seems like they probably will with more powerful hardware, if it can run, say, Unreal Engine 5 and people are able to just click play and it pumps out a Nintendo Switch 2 version, then great. I don't know that that's going to be the case, and I don't know how many studios are going to want to invest in porting over older games and also looking at their pipeline that they've got currently and saying, right, okay, let's tack on a Switch 2 version in here and we'll make sure that comes out. We're always going to get a PC release of most of these games. Right. That's a given.
They'll usually come first too, right?
Yeah, usually. I mean, with the case of like Rockstar being on the Abstract, where it usually comes to console first and PC a year later, I feel like with the Steam Deck, it feels like I'm not necessarily investing in the Steam Deck itself. I'm investing in the ecosystem of the PC. I'm investing in Steam. I know I can get a build my own PC, or I know there's going to be a Steam Deck 2, or I can move to an ROG Ally, and I'm going to be able to play all those games with me. With the Switch 2, it's less of that. I feel like I'm investing in the piece of hardware and I've got a limited lifespan. And I know I'm going to be able to play the games for 7 years, but who knows after that? Like, is the Switch 3 going to even be a thing? Am I going to be able to play my games over there? I don't know those things at the moment. And I feel like weirdly, the Steam Deck is more of the known quantity at the moment.
Steam's more of an investment, isn't it?
Right? Like, we already know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, this is the first time that Nintendo is seemingly not fucking it up when it comes to moving generations. Like, this is the first time that I can potentially log into the same eShop I logged into on my last console and download all the games I had before, which has never been possible. Like, we've always had to go through the weird, like, you could have your Wii next to your Wii U and you can port the games over, and it was a whole mess. And those games were like locked to that console, not to the account. It seems like maybe they've nailed that this time, but I don't know that I have much trust in that, considering they're still using friend codes and like the whole system of like online is just a complete mess.
Yeah, I don't think I was thinking about this when we were thinking about predictions. I was thinking, maybe I'll predict that there's going to be a huge shake-up in how Nintendo handles online. It's just not going to happen. I guarantee we're still going to have the same Nintendo app, the same Nintendo voice chat situation.
Yeah, probably.
Like, none of that fundamental stuff is going to change, I think.
My only pushback on that is I could see them potentially like advancing some of those features because so much of the hardware stuff is not advancing, and like maybe you do focus more on like
there's also stuff they've added a microphone. Like, we know, we've seen that there's a hole for it in the trailer. It was rumored that there was a microphone in there. And that is something that I did love on the Steam Deck. Like, I remember it was UP that told me you first tried it with Multiverses. And then I played Deceiving with a friend on the Steam Deck. And it was just like you just connect and it works, and it's just like, holy shit, this is how it should work on the Switch.
Yeah.
And I do hope they get stuff like that right, because if I can just talk with friends with a microphone, then that'd be like next level. You know, it's like this is where it should have been back in 2016 when it launched.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things where it's like, I think on services levels, right? Like the Steam Deck will probably always have the edge, you know, just because of the ways that Nintendo is like kind of obtuse with some of those things. But yeah, it is interesting because it's like, I don't know, like if the reports we're getting are correct, right? Like the power differential between these might be pretty large, and it will be interesting to see like what, I don't know, like I guess what the narrative is around Steam Deck when it's no longer the niche thing that's also more powerful, right? Like it's niche and it costs more and it's less powerful than a Switch 2. Is that?
I don't think it's going to cost more. Like I do think it's probably going to be cheaper, but it does seem like the Switch 2, based on the leaks, is going to be maybe on some things it's more powerful, on some things it's not. Like apparently it's got 12 gigabytes of RAM, whereas the Steam Deck obviously has 16.
Right.
We don't know what the clock speed's going to be running at. It's hard to tell, and also because it's like an ARM-based chip rather than x86, like you can't really compare these. Like, you know, it's like comparing apples to oranges. And I feel like NVIDIA really is like in a class of its own when it comes to this stuff, though. Like DLSS is on a whole other level to anything that AMD or Intel is pumping out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really is going to be the secret sauce of the Switch 2 and this generation. Is going to be the AI stuff, the machine learning, the what can we do, the frame generation. Like we've seen some of that stuff coming with FSR 3 and 4. Like we've seen that frame generation is potentially possible. It's not really come to any games that of any relevance on the Steam Deck yet. It is going to be coming to the Switch 2, and that could potentially really kind of change the goalpost and make Valve, I think, potentially look and go, you know what, we need to look heavily at potentially some machine learning stuff, whether that is doubling down on FSR or looking to develop their own solution or whatever it may be. But I feel like NVIDIA's tech is where it's at, and obviously Nintendo's kind of got that exclusive agreement with them in terms of developing a handheld, and that may be to the detriment of systems like the Steam Deck.
I feel like it's honestly probably more a detriment to the other handheld PCs, if I had to guess. You know, we talked a lot about that last week about like,
well, they're starting at like $600, right, for the Legion Go S.
Yeah,
you know?
and if like the stuff that you're talking about ends up panning out that way, right, where like the Nintendo Switch 2 is that powerful and like does have, you know, and again, right, like it's able to take advantage of, you know, these like software solutions to get more out of the hardware, right? Like, are you going to be willing to spend? And again, right, the rumor on the street is that, you know, Switch 2 is probably retailing somewhere around $400, right? So it's like, are you really going to spend $200 more on an ROG Ally X or something like that when there is this other shiny new toy that's cheaper, you know, and has exclusive games on it, right? Like that's obviously the X factor of Nintendo consoles, is that like if you like Zelda or Mario or whatever, like that's where you're going to play them. But like I think it is more the like it as a like, oh, this is where I play all my indies or something like that, right? Is like that my Steam Deck has totally supplanted my Switch.
And I think it's going to continue to be that because the indies are going to take ages to come. I remember it used to be we'd wait for the kind of indie highlights and be like, oh, I really hope, you know, Crosscode is coming over to the Switch because I've heard it's really great, but I don't want to pick that up on PC. It seems like the kind of game I want to play on a handheld. The Steam Deck came out. I never even thought about it. I was like, oh, Balatron's out. I'm going to go download that. It's on Steam, and I'm going to play that on my Steam Deck right now.
Early access stuff that comes out day and day. You don't have to wait for the Switch version. I think that the thing with indie games as well, like the Switch 1 was my big indie machine, right? The Steam Deck is now my big indie machine because all the games run better, they come out earlier, blah, blah, blah. If the Switch 2 comes out, cheaper. If the Switch 2 comes out, and let's say all of the new indie games, you know, I do take advantage of all of that stuff. That's great. You know, we are relying on all the developers to go back and make all of the old games better. If you bought a Steam Deck the day the Switch 2 comes out, you are guaranteed that whole back catalogue works in the way that it works now, as opposed to on what you don't want to do is boot up a Switch 1 game on your Switch 2 and it still runs at 30 FPS at 600p or whatever.
We
It looks like
worth pointing out, we don't totally know how that's going to play out, because they could have some kind of like smart delivery system where like the games just do naturally run better and it doesn't take that extra mile. But like, point taken, right? That like that's never something you have to worry about with PC, with Steam Deck. And actually, it's the opposite, right? Like, because games that don't run on it end up running on it eventually.
Yeah, you see more, like you get a Proton update and it's like, oh, that runs. However, there is the kind of elephant in the room of anti-cheat, and that always being a burden and a problem. And, publishers can release an update like the EA app and require that to be a launcher, and then everything breaks all of a sudden. So there are those things you have to be wary of. And also the fact that, I think the thing the Switch really has in its favor is in the name. It's like the seamless switch from handheld to docked to playing on the TV to taking it back out again, and it flawlessly works.
Yes.
That's something the Steam Deck and Steam OS has still not nailed, and we've spoken about it for like 2 years at this point, but they still have not figured out the docked experience. Like, it is a nightmare. Like, you launch a game, say, in handheld mode, and it's launched in 16:10. You go to plug it in, the screen can't adjust. It's still 16:10. It's still the 900p resolution of the display on the Steam Deck, rather than it matching the display that it's turned into. Or you do it vice versa, and it's plugged into a 4K display. The game boots up in 4K. Now it runs at like 2 frames per second because it's trying to pump out 4K, and I unplug it and it's still running in 4K because it doesn't know what to do, and then the game ends up crashing my whole Steam Deck.
And your controller can't automatically hot swap over. You have to come out of the game, go back in. Sound sometimes won't work. I had an issue recently, 2 issues recently, where I was playing a game on the TV, unplugged it, started booting into games in the normal handheld mode, and controls just weren't working in games. And it was because for some reason the Xbox controller that was no longer connected was still set as player 1. I had to restart the Steam Deck. Also, I recently booted up Slay the Spire, which I played once last year on the TV, and it automatically chose this is a 16:9 game. It then could not launch in full screen 16:10, and I had to. I was out at a friend's house, so I tried to do that at first. Still didn't work. I had to go home where my dock was, or where HDMI dongle was. Plug it into the TV, take it out of exclusive full screen, change it back to windowed, then unplug it, and it worked. And that was something that took me like a lot of Googling, because I couldn't even get into the settings because it was like that. And it's just not that seamless an experience. Whereas the the Switch comes with the console, the dock, and built-in controllers that you can then take off and use as a controller. It's all one package. It's not 3 different things you have to buy and then hope that they work and Google a ton just to get it to work. And then, don't touch it. It works. Don't touch it. Because it does just work.
Yeah, I still think, though, for the most part, it is 2 different markets. And I do think the people that buy a Steam Deck probably also have a Switch. I would imagine the overlap on it's got to be at least like 60%, right? That they're hardcore gamers. They're really into video games, like the 3 of us. They want to play Zelda. They want to play Mario. They want to play Animal Crossing, and they want to play the exclusives. Yeah, you could stream them you could emulate them on the Steam Deck at a certain point, but that's going away.
Yeah.
The Switch 2 games aren't going to be emulated. They're probably locked down the security on that to no end, because they completely screwed up with the Switch 1, and they're not going to want to replicate that scenario. So I kind of feel like you're going to get a Switch 2. And I also feel like for the other games, you buy the Steam Deck. If you're buying a Steam Deck, you're a tinkerer. You want to play. You want to potentially play games that you're never going to get on Switch, and also just install emulators, install things that you can't install on a closed wall system. Go get games from GOG. Go play some DOSBox stuff. Play some things that you're never going to experience anywhere else.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? In terms of the Steam Deck killer, where it's just like, yeah, I mean, like those are always things that it'll have that are unique value propositions, and I don't think that there's any risk of those things changing, because just like they're such different devices, right? Like aside from the fact that they're both handhelds and like you might have crossover in terms of like the indie library or whatever, it's like beyond that, I think the main, reason in my mind that they can both coexist peacefully is that like you're going to be able to play different stuff on them. Like they aside from all the other value propositions, things like EMU deck, whatever, like any of those kinds of things that are like obvious advantages, one way or the other. Yeah, it's like at the end of the day, like I'm going to be playing both of them, and whatever game I'm playing, that, wherever it plays best or wherever I can play it first is like, that's where you're going to play it. Like, I think the real handheld enthusiast is going to be excited to have another option, right? Not like, how can I trade in my Steam Deck for a Switch 2? Or like, I was going to buy a Steam Deck, but now I won't, right? Because it's like, I think whatever reasons you probably had for buying your Steam Deck are still going to be relevant in a post-Switch 2 world.
You play games, not hardware, and
Sure.
some of the games I'm most excited for this year are both on Switch, and I'll be playing them on Switch, whether that's Switch 1 or Switch 2, because that's where the game is, not necessarily, a game isn't less valuable because it's on a certain piece of hardware,
But hardware can elevate the experience. Like, I would probably pick a game up on Switch 2 if that hardware can play the game better than my Steam Deck. And like that, I'm going to be looking at that now, which isn't something I ever had to think about. I always knew it was going to play better on my Steam Deck than it would on my Switch, because it's infinitely more powerful. We don't know what the power is going to be like and what the differential is going to be, but I would imagine they're either on par or the Switch 2 surpasses it. I'm curious at what point Valve looks at the Switch, looks at the stuff with the Ryzen Z2 chips, looks at the other handhelds that are coming out, potentially some of the stuff that Intel's working on. If it's anything like the MSI Claw, they don't have to be worried. But if there's something new that comes out over there, when do they react to it? Do we see an announcement of a Steam Deck 2 or a revised Steam Deck this year, or is that next year or beyond? Because there's the rumor that we spoke about on the Flip Screen Games podcast this week as well, that Microsoft potentially announcing a new piece of hardware this year, a handheld or a new console or something that could come out in 2026. We don't know if that's true or not, but it's a possibility. And this market, which didn't really exist other than the Switch, has now got very, very crowded very, very quickly, which is kind of surprising, because I think none of us, when the Steam Deck was announced, would have expected it to kind of blow up in the way it has, and the whole market to kind of explode.
Yeah, I laughed at this when the Steam Deck was announced. I was like, "Oh, here we go again. Yeah, all right, that's going to take off." And now, here we are. Here I am.
Talk about it every week, Max.
Yeah, everybody day. People get bored of me. Here we go, Steam Deck again. Is it? Yes, it's fucking fantastic.
Yeah, and I do think that. I think that's the thing I'm most interested about over the next couple of years, is like, it's clear that there is like a taste and a hunger for handheld gaming that, I think for a while, the mass market had kind of decided that was over, right? That it's like, oh, with phones and tablets and all, like, do we need dedicated handheld video game devices? And I think the market has loudly said yes, right? And that there is room for more than one, at least, right? But I think the answer is like, how many of them, right? Like, how many of these players can reasonably carve out a niche for themselves? And I think that, when you think about a world where there is a PlayStation handheld, there is an Xbox handheld, you have the Nintendo Switch 2, you have the successor to the Steam Deck at some point down the line, like, I do wonder if there's going to be enough space for the hangers on,
It'll be people like the Iron EOs that
anybody that's not
further
connected to a
west, I
storefront,
think,
right? Like anyone that where like the business model isn't, we sell you hardware and then we sell you games. I don't know how you survive.
Unless it's a differentiator there. Like, I could see Microsoft's model being the Windows model, where they don't necessarily make the hardware and they kind of license out Xbox OS. It's worked well for them on PC side. And I'm always astounded how the market supports that many laptop manufacturers and that many mobile phone manufacturers, and yet it seemingly does, and they're able to differentiate in different ways, in design, in specs, in price, in whatever. I could see that.
Do enough people
being the way it
buy
goes.
these devices for that to bear fruit there, though? Because like every person has a smartphone. So the
Yeah.
idea that you could be like the 10th most popular smartphone developer and still make
You're
like
still selling millions.
yeah, it's like, okay, cool. Like that
Yeah.
makes sense to me, right? But like the idea that there's going to be the big four and then like, I don't know, even 2, 3, 4 other, like, I don't know, you know? And maybe again, like Max said, right? Like we all laughed at the idea of the Steam Deck initially, but then here it is. So maybe it is as simple as like, this is just a new way that people want to interact with media, and it's going to stick around, and you know, being able to come out and have like cool little hardware differentiators will be enough, because it will be less about the Steam Deck and more about powered by SteamOS, powered by Windows handheld or whatever. Maybe, yeah, and maybe it's that simple, but I do wonder, right? Because to your point, like I think when you have these big entrenched companies like Steam, like Nintendo, like, you know, Xbox, right? PlayStation, that are like, you know, trying to stake their claim and trying to eat up a percentage of the handheld marketplace. It's like, yeah, like, I mean, we just talked for a half hour about how it makes sense to have 2 handhelds. Does it make sense to have 4 or 5? Right? Does it make sense to have more than 2 if you also have home consoles or you have a PC? And it's like, you know, it's like,
I mean, it could. Like, it depends what platform you're bought in on, right? Like with the big 4 platforms, PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, it's like, if I'm bought in on Xbox and all my games are there, I'm going to want an Xbox handheld because I can
Right.
bring the games that I bought last gen over with me. If I'm bought in on PlayStation, I think they've got to be looking at it, seeing the success with the PS Portal, which has kind of popped off in a way that I never expected. They've got to be looking. Yeah, and they've got to be looking at getting back into the handheld market. The Vita was a disaster, but I think they could do it correctly.
it wasn't the Vita, right? Like it was like every decision they made
everything
around
it.
Yeah, it's like it was, the price was too high, proprietary memory, like not enough support. You know, it was just too. I think the hybrid model, it makes a lot more sense for anybody, right? Because it's like if the goal is not, here's the other second device we need to support and have an entire marketing strategy, game exclusive games, all that stuff. If you can just be like, here's a companion to your PlayStation 5 or your Xbox, and it just your library goes with you, right?
Or it is your PlayStation 5 or your Xbox.
Right.
If it gets
you don't even need to buy one, right? You just buy that. Yeah. Like that's I think the thing that Steam Deck does so well. And like you said, the Switch, right? It's like it's all in one device. That's what you like about it, you know? And like with Steam Deck, it's less the all-in-one device and more the like, your library is this, you know, thing that exists across whatever screen you engage with games on, right? Whether that's at your desktop, whether that's on your TV, big picture mode, whether that's on your Steam Deck.
Yeah.
And I think that is, you know,
that's the dream that Phil Spencer's chasing. That's what the new This Is an Xbox campaign is about. However, no one wants to buy games on the Xbox store on Windows. They want to buy games on Steam, and they've lost that market. They've lost the PC market when it comes to actually selling you games. Yes, they really do own the operating system there that the games rely on, and they've lost the living room. They just have lost it. No one buys Xboxes anymore.
Yeah, they've also lost selling you games in general. They've sold you this dream of Game Pass, and that's great, but now they're having to move on to PlayStation just so they can actually sell units of games now.
Right.
And I think that on PC, the only option you have there is, you know, because you're competing with Steam, is you have to bolster up Games Pass or do something to, you know, or like you say, you create a walled garden with an Xbox handheld, and that's it. And the same with PlayStation. That is a walled garden. Same with Nintendo, walled garden. The only one that isn't that and is freer, blah blah blah, is the Steam Deck, but that comes with the caveat of
it's your job to get over the wall.
Yeah,
like the wall's there, but they gave you a ladder. You know, it's like like you could scale the wall if you want.
You can put it wherever you need it to go, but we're not doing it for you. Whereas I guarantee a Sony or a Microsoft,
they put barbed wire at the top of the fence.
But all the toys are in there, so you don't need to look over the wall because it comes with all the toys. It comes with everything. Everything just works.
Yeah, but those toys are really expensive. It's like you're stuck in an airport and you need a bottle of water, and it's costing you like $5.
Yeah.
Yeah, And that's the thing. Like, that's the trade-off, right? Is like each option comes with advantages, right? And like there are reasons that people prefer one over the other. And I think what's so interesting to me is like that small Venn diagram between those two types of users, and like that's what the Steam Deck is. Like, it is that interesting, like, it does appeal to the PC player that's already deeply entrenched in the Steam marketplace, that, you know, wants to just kind of elevate, you know, the way that they interact with their Steam library, right? It's just another option, and like that's the big advantage, right? Or if you're like a more console-minded person, it's like, well, it's a console, and I can use the Steam. I get all the advantages of Steam that I never had before because I didn't want to build a PC. And like, you know, I think that you know, as a value prop is undeniable, right? And it is, I think, just a matter of like, I don't know, I guess just like how these next couple of years shake out in terms of like the handheld PC as a device, and like, are there, you know, is there enough room for growth for them all to kind of like succeed here and like carve out niches, because they have these, like you said, right? Like, if I'm an Xbox player, then like I would gravitate towards the Xbox handheld and maybe not get the PlayStation one, right?
But what's crazy is like Steam's just given away the Big Mac sauce. You know, it's like they've given away what was their little special something. It was Steam OS. And you can now start to get that on other devices.
But I
What
think that
is the
speaks to the
draw
Xbox
now?
thing. It's like, then it's like, this is a Steam Deck. Anything's a Steam Deck then, right? And like, that's good for them because ultimately, like, they make their money on hardware,
Yeah,
or on software, not hardware.
Then the Steam Deck there surely is the value proposition. There you go. Oh, you like all these handheld PCs that cost £600? Here's the same thing for £450, and it's got these
Right.
specific features that you like, and it gets these updates to SteamOS first, or you know, yada yada yada, whatever that might be. You know, it's
Yeah, like I
yeah.
could see them being like, oh, you know, it would probably be similar to smartphones, right? Like, oh, Samsung gives you 2 years of Android updates, but if you get the Steam Deck, you get it for like the next 5, and
Yeah,
you're
well, yeah. I mean,
guaranteed to get those.
it's a Pixel phone, I guess, isn't it? It's why would I buy? Why would Google, you know, release Pixel phones when they've given Android away? And it's because they make their own hardware. They have the
Right.
best cameras. They have the USP of it. It's stock. There's no issue. You just get exactly what you get, which is base Android, great camera in a, you know, with a Google bit. Granted, the Google hardware's shit, but you know, if Steam wants to do things like you said before about making their own chips, doing something that's away from, you know, that could be their thing of like, oh, we have our own version of FSR or DLSS that's our own, you know, thing.
Well, they've got that deep partnership with AMD, right? They've got a chip that no one else has. It's not the same chip that's in the ROG. It runs at a different TDP. It can achieve things that those other chips can't do.
I also do think it's worth calling out that, like, you were just making the point about, oh, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What'd you just say, Max? What was the last point you just made?
I don't fucking know. That was like
back to back ADHD. This is what happens when you have 3 motherfuckers with ADHD host a podcast.
It was something to do with the Android thing. You have Android.
That was it. I got it.
The Pixel phone.
Pixel phone.
Okay. So to take it back to the point you made about like Google, right? Like the Google phone versus the Android thing. That's also, I think, on some level, the like asserting like brand loyalty, right? Because like there are a lot of people that are brand loyal to Steam, right? And it's like, I don't want to, if a game's exclusive on Epic, I'm not playing it. I don't want to use that launcher. Steam is my launcher, right? Or like,
there's a lot of that.
Or like, I would never buy an ROG Ally. Like I'm a Steam guy. Like, it's like that person exists, and I think them trying to kind of like, you know, cultivate that audience more and like create, you know, again, just like furthering your connection to your Steam library, to your Steam account, to your friends list there, like all that stuff is only to their benefit, you know?
Gabe Newell. None of the other players have Gabe Newell. We've got Gabe.
That's true.
Yeah, until he decides to sell the company, which is a distinct possibility. Like I do wonder, like, you know, what does the world look like if Microsoft buys Steam? And like,
Yeah. I don't like it. I don't
Could
like
happen.
thinking about it.
they're really the only ones that I could see would buy them and could afford to buy them.
But Game Pass on Steam.
I guess there's also the likelihood that he could sell his stake in the company and not like sell it to another corporate owner. Like it could stay owned by the board, right? And he could just sell his shares to the people that are already there invested in the company, and we just keep going. But yeah, I mean, it certainly not outside the realm of possibility. And there are a lot of other big companies that could do it if they wanted to, because it's like, to your point, like, we've talked about companies like Google and Amazon, and like
I could see Google get back into it, and being like, you know what, let's get into
we can, it's like if we can buy Steam, then it's like we don't have to do anything. We just buy already successful business and just
rename it Stadia.
That's what they did with Fitbit, and they ruined Fitbit. But no, it's Stadia. They ruined Fitbit. They ruined everything they touched.
That could definitely happen. But my point is, I wouldn't be surprised if a big tech company like made that play, right? Or even like Apple or something like that, where it's like, we've always been on the outskirts of this. Like, if we buy them though, then we're just there, we're in, right? And it's like you could do that.
Ready-made.
Yeah.
Oven ready. Is that the phrase?
Yeah, there you go. Oven ready.
Boris phrase, yeah.
Acquisition.
Yeah.
So
can't believe I just quoted Boris Johnson. Sorry.
It's okay. We'll forgive you. So, I mean, I guess ultimately, I'm with the idea that like these devices are so different, and like their purposes, their audiences are so different that like I think they can absolutely coexist peacefully, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is a decline in interest around the Steam Deck when that device comes out, just because a large segment of us will go buy it and have the new thing and want to play the new games and be looking for things to play on it. And you might play some indie games that you would have played on your Steam Deck on Switch too, just because you want to be on the device. So like, yeah, I think that's probably inevitable, but the idea that like it's gonna, like be a dagger to the handheld PC market or something.
Yeah, it's like it's gone now. It was fun while it lasted, but Nintendo's back on stuff. I don't think it's going to happen like that. And I think they're going to need to do something to keep the kind of energy behind the Steam Deck. Like they've moved into new markets last year. They can continue to do that this year or release a new version. If they get into China in 2025, then it's just like, wow, okay, you're going to sell like gangbusters. It's going to be a crazy year for them, because the Switch 2 won't be in China year one. It's going to have to go through the process of getting approved, being sold through Tencent, having its own special store like the current Chinese version of the Switch. Steam is in China now. They could theoretically sell a Steam Deck in China if they got
PC
approval.
gaming is already like very established there too. So the idea that like even if the Switch 2 does come out, that like maybe the Steam Deck would just be more popular is like not crazy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the most popular games in China would be playable on Steam Deck probably, and not Nintendo. So
yeah, that would be my guess, right? Yeah. Well, there's got to be a bunch of games that are exclusively on PC in China.
Yeah, like stuff like World of Tanks and shit like that are like, oh, like that's like a huge, or maybe it's not now, but it was at one point, right? Like that was like a huge game there for a while. So it's like, I could definitely see that being the case.
Yeah, I only know that game from Instagram adverts. That and that Royal Match game. It's got great graphics. You don't need Wi-Fi.
Crazy budget. Crazy budget for adverts as well.
Like, yeah, it's like it must have been done in 20. They must have recorded them all in 2020 and just gone crazy on Cameo and just been like, let's get everyone, every actor to do a Royal Match advert.
You can play that on Steam Deck. There you go. We'll get Royal Match on Nintendo Switch too. All right, folks. So that's going to wrap it up for today's show. I would love to hear from you, the listener here. I guess, overall, are you interested in a Nintendo Switch 2? Are you, like, you don't see the need for it at this point because you are so in on the Steam Deck, and maybe you don't care about Nintendo's exclusives or whatever, so you're kind of just It's a never for you, right? Or are you one of the listeners who was like a console player and came over to Steam Deck because you wanted something that had more under the hood? And then do you think this will change your relationship to the device at all? Will you find yourself over on Switch 2 now instead? I'm interested to hear from the community because I think there's just so many different use cases for what a standard Steam Deck user is, that like, I think the answer will be a little different for all of us. I'm very interested to see how the public opinion shakes out on this one. So make sure you write in for next week's show, and we'll read your thoughts on the air. So, flipscreen.games, head over there, click on some stuff, check out the sister shows, write in for next week's show, join the Discord, support us on Patreon. However you choose to get involved or show your support, you can do it over there, flipscreen.games. For the crew, I've been Pete, he's been Steve, over there's been Max. We'll see you next week.